My name is Elliott. My pronouns are he, him. I am the director of Seattle Arts and Culture for Anti-Racism. Thank you for being here. We have been spending a lot of time, Saka, the past this year around really thinking about how are we centering people in their experience? Really, how are we rooting things like harm repair and accountability in principles of restorative justice, where we're centering the person that has been harmed, but we're also believing in the capacity of the person that has caused harm to show up and to do different. I feel like Seattle is very good at being like, hey, I am not racist or transphobic. Okay, I compost. Okay, I voted for Obama both times. I'm a good person, right? Rather than thinking about like, what are also some ways in which I cause harm? Taking a deep breath, recognizing it doesn't make me bad. It might mean that like, I also exist in a white supremacy culture as you do, and we're going to cause harm to one another. What happens when we do that? How do we move through that and heal? So today's Lunch and Learn, we're really going to be focused on how are we cultivating power for ourselves when we exist in toxic work cultures. We're going to hear from panelists who have experienced harm within the nonprofit sector and how they navigated those environments, what they learned, what their healing journey has been like, and how they are building collective power with others. This conversation will be rooted and centered in harm repair and justice that is rooted in principles of restorative justice and trauma-informed care. So before we get started, we always give land acknowledgements here. We give emotional labor acknowledgements, so I'm going to read those right now. We would like to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot tribes, and that we occupy this land. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but serves as a first step in honoring the land that we're on. Some of the feedback that I've heard from people I'm in community with, from Native and Indigenous communities, and in general, is when we're giving land acknowledgements, how are we making our solidarity actionable? What does that actually mean? What are we willing to risk? What are we willing to give up? How are we making space and using the power and privilege that we do have to do that? So some questions to consider. Have you committed to asking yourself whose land you are living on and how you have benefited from this land? Have you committed to supporting land reparations and the returning of land to Indigenous communities? Have you committed to paying land rent monthly to an Indigenous community? Have you committed to follow Indigenous leadership and decision-making about land use? Apply law to ensure land rights are protected. Build awareness and respect Indigenous people's role in land conservation. So how are we making sure that we're not just giving them acknowledgements, but actually building power with communities, building authentic relationships with people that we say we're in solidarity with? We also give an emotional labor acknowledgement. We're in a mixed race space, and so it's important for us to acknowledge that and how we're having this conversation. Emotional labor is the need for one group to regulate their emotions to satisfy another group, usually the group holding the most power. We want to acknowledge the diversity present and not present in this cohort. This group is currently comprised of predominantly white folks, and white folks inherently hold more power in our current social system. We also want to recognize that the folks of color in this cohort are inherently carrying the abundance of emotional labor, both in this room and on a daily basis as they navigate the world, many of them navigating multiple systems of oppression. We thank and honor those that do the emotional labor, and we agree not to exploit it. We acknowledge the need to hold this emotional labor as a group. And it is a goal of this cohort for the folks that do not tend to hold the weight of emotional labor to accept the complexity and pervasiveness of emotional labor. So just asking people to be in consent to that. I'm just giving a thumbs up, yes, I consent. Just kidding. We can talk about it. Okay, so I don't want to talk anymore, and I want to turn it to our panelists. I'm going to give some brief introductions before we get started, and then instead of reading your full bios, let me kind of speak a little bit. But we have my good friend, Julia Ishmael, she, her pronouns. She does a lot of amazing things. I'm gonna let her share about herself. Yvonne Chang, here in the middle, and Amy Vignon. You might have recognized Amy when we did our movie night. Amy is the filmmaker for And Other Oppressive Dynamics, which Saka showed maybe a month or two ago. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to each of you and let you introduce yourself.
First of all, I have to say thank you so much, Olina, for that introduction and bringing us into this space. To hear those words, like emotional labor in an introduction, is revolutionary. So I really want to thank you for that. It's the reason why I came. My name is Julia Ismail. I am the founder and head architect of aspirations at the Equity Consortium, where we have designed through the community an equity assessment tool, as well as a standardized equitable complete system. So I'm looking forward to sharing more with you.
Hi everyone, my name is Yvonne. Yvonne Chang, they share your pronouns. As with topic, I have been in the nonprofit industry for almost my entire life, in multiple different fashions as a volunteer, as an employee, and I'm excited to be here with you all today. Currently, I am the founder of my own independent consulting company. I work with small businesses and nonprofits and helping them be more mission-driven and aligned, and also to be more accountable to their communities.
Hello everyone, my name is Amy Pignon, but I also go by Amori. And as was mentioned, I have a film called And Other Oppressive Dynamics, which is based in 6 years worth of my experiences within the nonprofit sector and highlighting the stories of others who've experienced harm and how they have worked toward healing. So if you're interested in that film, please connect with me. It's not distributed anywhere currently, but hey, Cascade Public Media, hey, let's talk. We need to get that film out there. We need to have more conversations about this and humanity of staff members and workers as more than just bottom lines and what their roles are. I'm also a freelancer doing photography and filmmaking. I'm coming up on my 4-year anniversary of leaving the nonprofit industrial complex, but I still work adjacently with nonprofits, just not as a staff member anymore. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for taking time to introduce yourselves. I want to jump in because I know that we have limited time. How would Zaire defines restorative justice as a process to involve, to the extent possible, those who have a stake in a specific offense and to collectively identify and address harms, needs, and obligations in order to put things as right as possible? It's a really dry definition. But there are 3 assumptions in restorative justice. So when people in relationships are harmed, needs are created. The needs created by these harms leads to obligations, and the obligations are to heal and put right those harms. This is a just response. I really want to focus on that last part of it being a just response. And I'm curious if in your own experiences of harm within the nonprofit sector, how would you define justice or what a just response would be when harm happens?
We drew straws. Well, I'm glad you started with this question because my answer to justice in nonprofits, what is it? It's non-existent. It's very easy to describe in this way. And I say this not pointing out specifically to the nonprofit sector and field. I'm talking about in general. I'm talking about the average workers' experience, whether it be for-profit or nonprofit. There's simply a lack of justice systems in between work where you have the incident to the place where you're filing a complaint with the Seattle Office of Civil Rights. So whatever governing agency your organization happens to fall into. There is an absolute wasteland of justice. And it is through no fault of an organization, it's through no fault of the individual, is that we have just simply lacked the structures that are necessary to accomplish justice. If you think about the founding fathers of this country, it took them how much time and energy and effort to create a justice system that feels fair. If we're expecting organizations who have organized themselves not around designing a justice system, but around the mission that they're actually trying to accomplish, it's not unusual, it's not unexpected that they would know how to create a justice system from scratch. And this is why there's an absolute lack of justice, is because there's no consistency. There's no transparency, there's no accountability. But the problems are multitudinous when we have organizations who are left with this void in their organizing. So what do? We cut and paste. We take employee handbook, complaint systems, cut and paste. Talk to your supervisor. What if the person causing the problem is your supervisor? It says go talk to HR. What if somebody in HR is the person who's causing the trouble? What do you do in those instances? We have thousands of scenarios in our justice system to figure out, well, what if this happens? Or what if that happens? We have things like conflict of interest. Okay. None of these things exist. As soon as we walk into our workplace, it's Wild West. So this is why the answer is very easy for me, that there is no justice. There's an absolute lack of. And it's through no fault of our own, but it is our responsibility to fix it. So with that, I'll pass it to you.
I can go. Wow, okay. I strongly believe that nonprofits exist because there is a lack in our society. Nonprofits are created because there is a lack of government assistance in that area. There is no support system for these things. So nonprofits realistically can be kind of started at any point, by anybody, at any time. As long as you have something that can, prove to the IRS that you're doing this for good or for your community, then you can really exist in all shapes and fashions. And a lot of the times, these nonprofits, because we almost view them like these startup organizations, they aren't, equipped with a lot of the HR, the operations that allow the systems, though, that give them the systems to feel safe and perhaps even reach some sort of resemblance of justice in their organization. And oftentimes, when you go to your manager, most likely, often than not, they might be the ones that are the problem. You go to HR, perhaps in nonprofits, are in fiscally sponsored organizations. So your HR is actually removed from your organization because they know what's going on. We don't have the systems built in place for nonprofits to have justice. And I am right there with you.
Yeah, I'm on the exact same page. I think that if we're really talking about justice, it means that this system of nonprofits is abolished. It no longer exists because we don't need it anymore. Now, that is not to say that we don't need small organizations and communities doing community work. We need that, right? But a great quote that came out of one of my interviews in my film, I don't want to take credit for this quote, but it's that nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model. That's all that it is. And that creates a lot of the problems that are in the sector. If you think about it, and this is how I think about it, and I think one of the biggest takeaways from my film is that the way nonprofits are funded, and when we speak about this nonprofit industrial complex, right, the interconnection between nonprofits, government, corporations, foundations, funders, institutions, all of that is an ecosystem that feeds into itself. And nonprofits are having to fight for funding. They're having to compete in that space in order to say, hey, our needs in this community, the work that we're doing matters the most. We need this funding, right? And then they get that funding, and then they're burdened with having to deal with all of these reporting requirements. It takes extra time on their staff. It takes extra capacity in order to receive those funds and to use those funds for programming. We have to remember that not all those funds that go towards nonprofits just go toward the community and the funding, right? They have an overhead. You are all staff members, right, at organizations that need to get paid. So that creates a lot of harm, I think. And so if we're thinking about justice, the whole system of nonprofits is inequitable. It's an inequitable system. So if we truly had justice, it wouldn't exist. We'd have a different system of fully funding communities and organizations and social services and all of the types of organizations that you all work for. And so I think like we have to really think about that and push back, right? I think part of justice is if we want to get there, you have to think of your role in your organization, whether that is executive staff, if it's board, if it's you're in fundraising development, you interact directly with funders and foundations, or any other role, whatever your role is, how can you push back on that system, right? Because I don't think nonprofit systems are going to get abolished within, probably my lifetime. I just don't believe in that. I would love to see it. I would love to see a movement toward that. But how can we work within this while we still have to work within a system that is so inequitable? And so I think part of that, there's a lot of things, but I'll just mention one thing that I think is pushing back against funders and their requirements, giving them feedback, right? I've seen this so many times that foundations require so much, so much time put into the application just to get these funds to do this work that is great and should be funded already. It should be funded without a doubt, without a question. You have to answer on a paper, and then they might, come back to you and say, okay, we're considering you for a $500,000 grant that could be revolutionizing for your work, but we want to do interviews with you and your staff. But we want to walk into your, programs. We want to gawk at the young people in your programs. We want to come and do that whole savioristic thing. Push back against that. That's part of justice and achieving that. Don't let that happen because you're perpetuating and upholding that savioristic narrative. And I know that's hard. I know that's easier said than done because it's there is a lot of money at stake, but the more people push back against these systems and the way that they're currently run, because you notice they're inequitable. I believe in everyone's ability to recognize it's an inequitable system. So push back against that and say, hey, we're not going to do that. And if you are able to do that in a way that you don't feel is too savioristic, and you can show them around and show them your programs and all that kind of stuff, or answer their questions, give them your time. Ask them to pay you, right? They haven't given you any money yet, or maybe they only gave you some money. Ask them to pay you for that time, right? That you are entertaining them. They have the money. So that's just one thing. I'll stop there.
I wanted to add to that, and since we're talking about inequities in special need funding, I mean, how many people have been here just working overtime because you're trying to finish a grant application that's asking you the same questions over and over again? Then you're finishing a 6-month report, then a 12-month report, where it's asking you also the same questions again. And you're supposed to tell them that you were able to accomplish the sky and the moon with the measly amount of money that they gave you. I think a lot of people have experienced a portion of that, or some understands that is that's kind of the shiny ball that all these small nonprofits are supposed to be chasing. And we're under this sparsity mindset that if they fund one organization, then this organization doesn't get funded. Or then they get to pick and choose between, oh, I'm going to pick between one of multiple nonprofits that are doing this work. And how do you really achieve justice in that way? And so that's really something that's pertinent, I think, to people who work in nonprofits, because I'm sure everybody has read the grant application, filled out a portion that was assigned to you, and then also realizing that you do all this work and for what, really?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And as we're talking about justice, it brings it back, at least to me, back to accountability. And we've spent a lot of time at SACA talking about what that means as individuals, as organizations. How would each of you define accountability? And what does that look like?
Would you go to? I want to listen to people. Okay. Yeah.
I think in response to your question, I'd like to share a little bit about my personal story and kind of how I ended up where I am. I worked for two similar affiliated nonprofits for over 5 years. And in that time, I was an office coordinator. I was the event planner. I was the comms person. I also then started to write their development and fundraising plan. Also wrote a budget. I've led multiple years of audits. I can't even list, I think the program work, the relational work, all while all the staff was leaving and they never wanted to hire anybody else, give me a raise, or even consider a title change for me, honestly. And slapped a title on me that was supposed to be all encompassing, but then argued that because that title was what it was, in market rates, I am justified to be paid below what I was doing, right? And at the very end, when I finally left because my manager and manager above that both verbally berated me, they recorded my conversation where I tried to share that happened to me. And tried to use it against me in case I tried to, come back and sue or have any sort of retaliation. So in that, I was very gracious. I gave them a long period of transition, given all of the things that I listed that I was doing. So I wasn't just going to leave it dry. And at the very end, I found out that ED had told the board members that I wanted the ED job. That's why I had left. So all that to say, I know that everybody has, experiences in their own craft that they deal with their workplace. But the thing about nonprofits and why it's causing so much harm and why accountability is such a weird thing for me in that regard is because they knew what they were doing to me all this time. And granted, I might have not really realized that in the moment that I was letting that happen to me, because it was just like, well, the reason why I stayed was because I have an attachment to the mission. I want to see the mission happen. I want to see the goal. I want to see the vision. I want to see it manifested and I want it to be true. And that was what kept me there. And that's what a lot of nonprofits use to reason you staying there, not to use your heart against you to justify that you don't deserve more pay or that you don't deserve more benefits, because the little piece of you that feels satisfied by being able to work in a field that you want to work in should be enough. And that's not enough. That's not accountability. That's not, and also nobody ever was accountable for my leaving. It was always just, oh, well, what's new? They're leaving. Nonprofit structures, people are normally burned out between 2 to 3 years. It's normal for them to leave. Why is that normal? Why is that normal? 2 to 3 years? Like, for most people in their careers, I think 2 to 3 years really gets you the time to settle in and know what you're doing at your job. How are you going to burn somebody out between 2 to 3 years and then just, who cares? And so accountability is a weird thing for me, because I don't know that I've ever experienced it. And I don't know what that looks like in the nonprofit industry, just because there's so many of these little pieces at play that I don't know what it means to be truly accountable in this space.
Can I just ask who that resonates for in the space of
It goes out to all of you guys because it sucks. I'm sorry.
Ooh, we getting revolutionary up in here.
Let's go.
I'm ready for all of this.
Where you're going.
Come on, we leave the station, we leave the station. It's not turning back, because we have had a glimpse of what we ought to feel like. And there's no turning back. When it comes to this word accountability, there are certain elements that keep us as a culture from accomplishing the equitable goals that we have set for ourselves. One of them being the matter of shame. There is an element of shame that organizations, that individuals exhibit when we are talking about issues of equity. And what that shame leads to is isolation. Isolation of the individual, isolation of the organization, from the community, from each other within the organization. Isolation is our number one enemy. Isolation is fed by silence. So think about these instances that happen to us when we are walking in our compassionate body selves, going to work, doing the beautiful mission that we have come to accomplish, and some little bullshit happens. Excuse my language, but I don't know what else to call it. Some little something, somebody says something, and what do? We quiet. We don't say anything. We don't complain. We don't hold them accountable for the discomfort and dis-ease that we are experiencing in that moment. We don't say anything. And I say we because I have not said things. So long I regret not saying things. This is what feeds this cycle of inequitable practices, is that they keep getting away with it because we don't say anything. So I've been practicing holding people accountable in that very moment, saying things like, it sounds to me like you're upset. Can I help you with? Is there something you want to talk about? It looks to me as if I'm in your way. Like, say the thing. I need to practice this because it is the most opposite thing in my DNA. I'm a Black woman. I have been taught and conditioned and trained to behave myself, to not cause trouble, to not appear as if I don't know how to work well with others. Why then do other people get to get away with it and I don't? Why do my white colleagues get to complain about my behavior when I don't? There is literally no difference. So when somebody wants to hold me accountable for my misdeeds or behaviors, that's fine. I'm totally down for that. Let me learn in public. Let us do this in public. The reasons why we get away with how my dear colleague was treated was because it's in silence. It just happens as if that's the normal course of business and this is expected. And of course they're going to behave like this because that's what they know. I'm done. I got no more patience for this. My body can literally not hold another ounce of uninvited trauma. I'm done. And so like when I walk into my workspace, I'm not there to talk about microaggressions. I'm not there to say, well, here's actually that this is kind of harassing. My bar is high. If you cannot figure out that this is an inappropriate place for this, then you need to be fired. I am done keeping people who do not belong in that position at the cost of my comfort, health, well-being, emotional safety. There is no more equation that works out like that anymore. I am valuable and nobody is going to take my value because they're having a bad day. It's just not going to happen anymore. It's not. And this is where I am, is that we are raising the bar and it's not like we have never done it before. Nobody goes to work and is okay with getting their butt slapped anymore. We are able to change our standards. And my standard is I go to work free of harassment. That's it. The same expectation I do when I walk out on the street, same expectation I do when I walk into a coffee shop. I am no different. My DNA, my body does not change. I do not change into a different species when I walk into the workplace. So that's where I am. I'm done. I'm raising my bar. And if you don't have a place to admire my value, I'll take it somewhere else. And it's your loss. Like, I'm for real. I will quit. She will quit. And you will never see us again. And like, good luck to you. You know what I mean? Because we are where the future is headed. And if you want to stay behind, you're going to suffer. And it's not my problem anymore. And this thing you're talking about, especially with the nonprofits, they hold our hearts hostage. And they say, if you're not able to do this job, well, how are the people going to be served? How are the students going to learn? They love you. What are they going to do without you? No, then pay me more. Because trust me, if I die today, you're going to post a job description before my obituary. So I am not worried about this job getting done. It will get done. And that's where I am right now. I got zero patience. Yeah. Thank you.
Really good question, from the nonprofit folks in here, who have been in a retreat and had a whole retreat talking about how all of our works are in silos. And we're so isolated from each other. How do we even figure out how to combine all our work together? It's interesting.
Yeah, so just also in response to that question about accountability and sharing some of my personal experience. So the abridged version is I worked at a nonprofit, an arts nonprofit for 6 years. The first year of that was AmeriCorps. That's a different story. And I came on as a, very basic entry level position with the organization and sort of worked my way up into this like media and communications role. And I started doing more photography of our programs, more video and media that could be used for grants and funding and fundraisers. I did the fundraising video. I learned a lot about ethical storytelling, which is what I do now, and do some consulting in that space because that's super important. I've been on both sides of that. I've produced videos of people with an ethical lens, and I've also been on the other side of that, being a subject in a video for an organization that felt very close. So I understand both sides of that, and that's what I learned in that role. And again, it being an inequitable system, sometimes you can't really push back. And so that's why I am very much like, you have to push back on these things. And like Julia is saying, you have to push back on these things. You have to object to things that don't feel right? And be like, no, this would be an unethical way to portray this person, right? This is very tokenistic. This is savioristic. We're not going to do this. And I'm also not going to allow you to do that to me, because I also had a very tokenistic role when I came from being AmeriCorps, being a young person coming into my role. And I was very tokenized for that. And so basically I became the whole communications, right? This is a huge thing we see in nonprofits. Your job, one person is 3 jobs, actually. It should be 3 jobs. And I actually just only had, and I'm 4 years away from that organization. I only just recently had this thought that they should have made me a director. They should have involved me in executive leadership conversations. I was doing all of the media and communications, but of course, no. And also, they weren't ever going to get rid of me because I was too valuable to them. They had never had a person like me in that position that did everything and was willing to just be like, okay, I guess I'll just take on everything, right? So push back, right? Like if I had put, and of course I don't like blame myself for that. I was coming up with a nonprofit. I had no idea how to have boundaries that I do now. I had no idea how to exist within the system. But if I had pushed back and been like, no, actually, you need to hire another person. You need to make me a director so that I can then manage other people to like do all of these other things that I cannot manage. All of that stuff. So yeah, accountability comes from pushing back, understanding these things. And also if you are seeing that, right? I'm sure there were other people. I know there were other people in the organization that could see that I was doing way too much. And if someone had advocated for me more, was able to, right? Because I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm sure they also felt that, they couldn't do that, right? They didn't have the space to advocate for anyone else because their job is also on the line, right? Like, I'm not, yeah. So everyone has their reasons for all of that and how they interact, but I think it's really important to highlight that. That piece is fighting for what you think is right within the system of that. And, when things dissolved at the organization that I was at, when folks were leading equity work, it was all cool. The board was like, yeah, this is great work. We are doing equity work. We're so ahead of the curve. And then all of a sudden those staff members were fired and just kicked out, and no reasoning or anything like that. The board became a very authoritarian force in the organization. They basically came in and said, well, we had gone through mediation, we had tried to like figure out this situation. I hung on, I stayed for the youth that I was, working with. I stayed for them, I stayed for the programs. I did not stay for all that mess. But the final straw for me was when the board president came in and basically said, you all get on board with what our definition of the mission of this organization is, or you get out. We're not compromising. We're not talking about this anymore. We're not having a conversation. We're not talking about harm. We're just basically saying we didn't cause any harm. You caused harm on yourself. It's your fault basically that you did this. You made this choice. And we're not going to talk. And that's when I knew that I had to leave. And I already was going to leave, but that's when I knew for sure, absolutely, this is my last few weeks here. And so accountability, yeah. I've seen it in my personal relationships, but not on an organizational level. I don't think I've seen it. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of those things. Gosh, there's so much there. I think one of the things that I want to acknowledge in this space that even amongst, like if you have a marginalized identity, we all have different levels of how we are processing that or how we're going to disrupt it, right? Julie and I can be in the same room and I might experience some kind of oppression, whatever. Julia might experience that too. And there are ways in which we live about the world as a non-Black person, as a Black woman, where I have more privilege in that space. Maybe there's spaces where Julia can navigate better as a non-trans person. But I think it's an important distinction to make when we're thinking about how we push back of thinking about your own safety too, right? And we all have different levels of safety, and safety and comfort are different. I think for a lot of BIPOC folks, there are a lot of unsafe things that you can do in your workplace that are not physically safe for you, that are not emotionally safe for you, where you can experience retaliation, where you can lose your livelihood, how you're making your job, right? And that is different from discomfort. I'm uncomfortable, I want that to stop. Discomfort does not mean unsafe. And we have to be willing to unpack what that means. I think the other thing I just wanted to say on privilege of how we are disrupting harm in the spaces. There might be a space where passing as a male, identified light-skinned Mexican person, I can say things that Julia can't, right? And how we are practicing doing that. Are we regularly practicing disrupting harm, both in building collective power with other people that we share identity with or we're in solidarity with, right? If you saw a panel we did one time ago, Joe was also on that panel about how are we making our solidarity actionable, not just saying, hey, I support you, here's my flag or whatever, right? But here's how I'm making a commitment to you. Here's how my solidarity is tangible. This is what I'm willing to risk and to let go of. I wanted to follow up on this conversation around accountability with a question around shame. So I'm curious what you think the barriers are to harm repair. So for example, how shame I know for me personally, shame can get in the way of me owning harm because I start to feel embarrassed. And then I get defensive and then that shuts me down. Sorry you feel that way. I'm awesome. I didn't do that. Or I didn't mean to do that. That's another form of gaslighting. You hurt yourself. It wasn't us. It must have been you, right? Or that wasn't my intention. Well, that doesn't matter if that was the impact. So what do you think are the barriers to harm repair?
Can I begin? I've been preparing for this moment. Can I talk about intuition for a minute?
Yes.
We have forgotten how to use our intuition. We have perfected the art of biases, fantasies, in which we are the perpetual hero. We are the ones who do no wrong. However, I urge us all to pick up our intuition and dust it off. because it's uncomfortable. It tells us things we don't want to hear. It says, Julia, you know you should do that hard thing that you really don't want to do. You should say that thing, and you know what? You should probably be nice about it, but try to make it effective, and not just. Intuition will tell you things about timing. It will give you the strength and courage in that moment where the harm is actually being perpetuated to stop it. And it's absolutely true what you said about depending on the bodies in which we occupy, we are told that we have different sets of rights and how we can express our intuition. We have been denied the ability to express our intuition, also known as, you know what, something just doesn't feel right. Like in those meetings, when you're like, can we just pause for a second? Because I feel like someone's being tokenized here. I can't put my finger on it, but some just don't feel right. How many times do we ignore that intuitive thought? That is our conscience talking to us, saying, slow the heck down, you're about to make a mistake. These are the uncomfortable thoughts that we have to begin to be familiar with, confident in experiencing and expressing, because I am full of rage. I ain't gonna lie about it. I'm full of rage, and it's righteous rage, because this world has given me infinite reasons to be enraged. However, my intuition says anger is not the best way to solve this problem. I must incorporate grace, because there's a difference in my universe between being effective and being right. I love being right, but I enjoy being effective. And this is where I am right now, is that when we are talking about overcoming these elements of shame, we are all children here. We are all babies learning new things. When a child is learning how to crawl, we don't laugh at them and ridicule them every time they fall on their cute little tushies. This is us having the ability to learn in public. There should never be any shame when one is curious. And that's it. And this is how I'm learning. I'm in the process now. You are seeing me work in progress. How am I learning how to incorporate grace so that we can overcome these barriers of shame? Because there is literally no reason. The future is not known by anybody. I don't know more about the future than you do. So there's no way to get it wrong. All we are ashamed of is not listening to our intuition. That's what brings me, that's what the things I regret is I didn't listen to my intuition. Your intuition never wrong. Your intuition is there to guide you. In my spirituality, that's the voice of my ancestors looking out for me. I mean, if we really want to get in on it, we are so wholly and fully connected. We've been telling each other the right thing to do in this very moment, right here, right now. We are energetic beings. So as soon as I'm allowing myself to open my heart to see this person who is obviously being pissy to me, that, oh, I'm sorry for you. Are you okay? Are you all right? Do you need a break? How powerful is that? This power thing is a two-way street. I have to also be willing to give it up for them to take it. They can take my peace of mind. No, I choose love. So if somebody is having a moment in their inability to move into the future moment, their prehistoric moment, and I'm not being anything but patient with this, because I know for a fact, even if they got my job in their hand, they can still not take my dignity. It's mine now. I've earned it.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
In the same vein, I had a lovely friend, who, after I was going through I'm still on my healing process after leaving, my work and all of that, but, my friend told me that everything in the world kind of boils down to what we fear. It's a little bit to what you're saying here. We operate so much in fear in this capitalistic white supremacist group society that we live in, because we're scared that something else is going to come along, that there's not going to be enough for everybody, that just because I have it means that somebody else isn't going to have it, or vice versa. And you're so full of fear. But really, if we think about it and really reflecting on this as part of growing and healing, if we look at everything with love and curiosity and understanding and empathy, like, we would get so far in the world if we didn't have shame holding us back. And another dynamic of shame is, I want to mention power dynamics, because oftentimes you feel so much shame because someone who has more power over you wants you to feel shame. And I don't know how to push back on that. That is still something that I'm learning, because that's something so deeply ingrained in me, so deeply ingrained, especially as women of color, and just generational trauma, and being a first generation immigrant. Like, there is so much shame built into me that I can't even begin to unravel shame over my family, over what I ate for lunch as a kid because other people want to make fun of me. So much shame. But if we approach the world with love, curiosity, understanding, and wanting to know what makes us human instead of shaming others for what makes us human, then think about how far we get in this crazy society that we all live in.
I don't really have much to add to that, but I just wanted to mention that something that was mentioned earlier around, what if the person that's causing you harm is your supervisor, or the person that you're told to go to talk about that or resolve that. So that's why I think that when we're thinking about creating systems, right, of harm repair, and like mediation, we have to have those systems in place that are more than just like, we'll talk to HR, right? Because that's not an effective solution. That's not going to solve a problem. Sometimes it is that someone needs to be fired. Sometimes it is just that maybe there was a communication misunderstanding and that needs to be worked through. Sometimes it's that somebody just needs to be removed from a situation entirely and not interact with that other person. Sometimes there's real conflict that could be worked through and then it could be all good, right? So there's so many different types of situations that could be happening. And I think the barriers to that is just like this sense of urgency, right? And like, we don't have time for this. We need to move on. We can't create like a whole process. We don't have time, like this whole urgency where it's like, we just need to move on, right? We're just here to do work. And I see two types of like work ideologies where one is like, we're a family. And then the other is like, we're separate people just, doing a thing, right? Like we're all just contributing to a team separately. We're not actual people. We're just workers doing the thing, right? And so there's separate ends. And I don't think that there's one right way to be. I think there's like pros and cons to each, right? I feel like this idea of like, I'm just going to do my job, has that element of like, you can have a little bit more boundaries because you're just doing what you need to do and you're not letting other things get in the way of that, right? But that reduces you to someone who's not human. You interact with people. You have to interact with people at some point, even if you work for yourself, even if you work mostly by yourself, even if you work remotely, right? You're going to be interacting with people and you need to know how to do that. And not everyone is taught how to do that. For me, like coming as a young person directly into a workspace, it's like, no one taught me the rules. No one taught me how this workplace works. No one gave me any training. That's a whole other conversation. Training, especially in nonprofits, doesn't exist as it does in corporate organizations. You need training for your job, right? Even if you're coming in knowing how to do your job, you still need training to be in that job, to figure out those specific systems, to figure out what the organization is. So all of those things, and I think And I just wanted to shout out a resource, community-centric fundraising. If you're not familiar, fantastic. Okay, glad to hear folks are familiar. Even if you do not work in fundraising, I highly recommend, if you have not seen it, check it out. It's a wonderful resource and a hub for, I think, a lot of these things that we're talking about in actually moving toward systems of action. And these things we're talking about around creating policies and systems that support equity and support humans and humanity in the workplace and support workers and, include funders in our work, but don't make them the center of everything, right? There's a whole concept around donor-centric fundraising versus community-centric fundraising, and that's what that resource is all about.
Thank you. Thank you to each of you for answering that question. I want to make some time for you all to ask questions, but just to highlight, I think I want to make the distinction too, especially if there are HR people in the room. When I talk about HR, and I think when we talk about HR, we're talking about as an institution. Maybe you're the person that is in HR that's trying to disrupt and create different ways of operating, different processes of helping facilitate accountability and harm repair when it happens. So it's not being swept under the rug. I was talking with a colleague this morning about, I think the fear always goes back to like, they might sue us, or there are legal ramifications, or it makes us liable. And I cannot tell you one instance where an organization or leadership or body or a group of people has said, you know what, we did cause harm. That wasn't our intention, but we're acknowledging that was the impact. Here are some ways that we want to be accountable. Here are ways or ideas we have to help you reclaim your sense of safety in this space. Here are the things that were happening for us. When you shared that, we experienced shame, we got defensive, or whatever the case is, and this is how we want to move forward. How does that feel for you? What does that look like for you? Are there other things that you need? I haven't had one organization or person that has gone through that process that people are like, great, I went through this process and now I'm going to see you. Now I'm going to call you out in front of everybody. Usually it's the completely opposite. It's like, hey, that didn't happen. He said he wouldn't do it again. He's going to take a class. Somebody told me one time, his wife is from Japan. I'm like, that has nothing to do with the harm that was caused, right? That really has nothing to do with that. What if accountability wasn't scary? Me and Mingus is a sort of justice practitioner that talks a lot about that. What if accountability wasn't scary? What if we created processes and safety nets that supported the person that was harmed? That said, like, this is your experience. My experience isn't to say, like, that wasn't racist. That's all happening. That wasn't sexist. But like, dang, we missed the mark in this instance, and this is how we're going to try to work through that. We've been trying the other way for too long. Like, how are we creating a different way of being and just giving it a chance, right? The last, if you can, I'm going to ask for 3 sentences. If you can make it this question, and then whoever has a question, just pop your hand up, and I'll bring you the mic. This is going to almost be impossible in 3 sentences, but in the instances that you were harmed, what do you wish would have happened? What do you wish would have happened?
Can I go first again? This is my jam.
Okay.
Okay,
3 to 5 seconds.
I would have loved to be presumed that I'm telling the truth. I would have loved to have an advocate of my choice. I would have loved to not have had the burden of proof fall solely on my shoulders. That's 3 sentences.
Dang, that was, yeah.
Oh, God, my card with
3 sentences. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, one, I wish I'd listened to my body. I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit just because I feel like people might be into this. And I don't want to share this because it's like a pity party or whatever, but I really worked myself super sick during the worst stressful times. It was pandemic. We were figuring out PPP loans. It was just not sure if the organization was even going to be making it through the pandemic. I actually lost my gallbladder at 26 years old. So that doesn't really make sense for someone of my age at that time to have gone through like literally organ failure. I actually had to miss a meeting because that's like, I was like in the middle of a meeting and then crying all of a sudden because I was in so much pain and had to like interrupt. And all of that time, all I felt was shame and embarrassment that I had to leave that meeting. And I literally went to the doctor. I was like, you need to get your gallbladder out tomorrow. And I was like, can I come back Monday? I have a meeting today. Why did you do that? That's insane. Like, that's wild for me to have felt my body do so much to wake up every single morning anxious and nauseous and just terrified to go to work. And for what? Like, I wish I'd listened to myself more. That's one. Sorry, that's a really long one. Second, I wish that people believed me. I wish I didn't have to make such a big case. And I wish that people were accountable. The person that caused me the most harm ended up quitting and getting a super high paying job a month later, and they, she didn't suffer any ramifications. So I'm gonna say that too, because I really wish in that time and harm I was my tuition, because I should have done that.
I wish someone had told me to take a break. Truly, really and truly. I wish someone had taught me really and truly about boundaries with work, because I have been working since I was in high school. Like, I went from high school, I took a month, I went to college for 3 years, did a bachelor's degree in 3 years, did not take a break, went into AmeriCorps, and then went to working at organization. I never took a break. I didn't know what a break was. I wish somebody had told me that and helped me, because a lot of my unlearning and healing has been about unlearning that productivity culture and that burnout. And I just, if I had had some sort of boundary with work, and if that was a part of the work culture, then I would be a lot healthier.
Can I say one more thing? If I get my attention. I'm thinking, especially now as I'm listening to the wisdom in this room, and the relationship with HR, as you so graciously pointed out, it's full of grace. I am very much interested in shared leadership models, wherein HR is able to focus on the tasks that they're most beneficial to the logistics of the organization. Somebody's got to do payroll, somebody's got to do all these things, right? This is what I consider human resource. When we're talking about conflict management and resolution, this should belong to the person who's most qualified in the organization. And so in the standardized complaint system model that my community has created, there are multiple ways where anybody in the organization can be an advocate for someone. And the last person to know anything is HR. So there is a confidence that I have in each other to be able to solve our own problems with the people we're most confident with. And so that, again, another thing that I think you've also experienced as well, and I'm sure that we all have, is like, why is it gotta be so big? Why does everybody gotta know my business? Like, can't I just keep it, it's just a little thing. Can I just have somebody go talk to this person? Every level should be appreciated and acknowledged for how complex and complicated that particular issue is. And try to involve as least amount of people as possible. Because guess what? If you're going to advertise your complaint system, people want to make sure that they have confidence that they're going to remain confidential. And so when your process is saying, well, we're going to involve this person and that person, we're going to interview these people, we're going to do an investigation. Nobody wants to go through that, so they don't use your complaint system. So anyhow, Lena, I know I'm getting in trouble. So you're not getting in trouble. I
want to take question. Yeah. I feel like I'm on the game show.
Let's write this one down. So thank you so much. To what extent has the filtering system helped or hindered the acknowledgement, addressing, and healing harm? What do I mean by the filtering system? You know, those things that we say that we wanted to say something else instead.
Let's try to keep responses to 2 minutes so I can get it. Oh, you want to repeat it?
Editing that we do.
To what extent has the filtering system helped or hindered acknowledging, addressing, and healing harm?
Ooh, I'll take this one. I am very much learning how to say truth with grace. And this goes back to something I mentioned earlier about being effective versus being right. So my knee-jerk reaction is to say like that thing, you know, like you're like, should I really press send or should I think about it kind of thing? What I'm recognizing and understanding is that people are craving the truth. And if I'm able to say that, like I remember earlier, I was saying when something in the midst of, and I pause and I say, are you okay? Like this, if I check in with my heart and I say to myself, are you seeing this out of love? Then I trust whatever my mouth is going to say. If and this is something that keeps us from complaining is we don't have the right words. That should never stop us, ever. Whatever words that you have available, you can say, look, I don't know the right words to say. I'm just trying to find the right words, but this is the best I got right now. Can you, please be patient with me, but this is all I got. And I'm pissed off. I'm not going to be pissed off forever, but right now, this is the only way I know how to express myself. Please be patient. We just have to be able to own this.
Do you want to give us the answer?
We have like 15 minutes. So let's just be
Inspired.
Yeah, if you have inspired, you can answer the question.
I was actually gonna say now, I think, now that I'm on the healing from the trauma journey, really understanding that at the time, that filtering system that I had did not serve me at all. I'm actually kind of in the opposite in the sense that like my filtering system prevented me from saying all the things that I actually wanted to say because my main focal point at that time always was other people's comfort. Is what I'm going to say cause somebody else harm, cause somebody else discomfort, make somebody unhappy, hurt their feelings. Like, and honestly, now on the other end, I understand that human beings they're able to be disappointed. And that's kind of the accountability. I didn't mean to have that, and let's talk about it. And it's very unlikely that my filtering system would allow me to say something that would be so detrimental in that sense if I didn't, really intend it that way. But I think part of the healing is also unlearning that what you thought was what you did in service of other people was actually really harming yourself the entire time.
I think I've just learned how to get just way more blunt with what I'm talking about. Like your style. I'm just like, as I get older, I'm just like, I don't have time to deal with all of this stuff. So I just need to tell you exactly what I need or what needs to happen or what is going on here. And we just need to address it. Like we need to be more direct because we don't have time. So I've just tried to be more direct. And also I feel like maybe a lot of people have seen like TikToks or Reels. I've seen a lot of them about like how to write an email, like a man or something, like where it's very much like, women have a way of being socialized to speak in a certain way to be like, could you please do this? And like, I think these types of things and just like cut those out and be like, I need this. I need this done. We need to have this meeting. When can it happen? Just cut out all those little things. And of course, sometimes it's fine, but if you really need something, I think it's just a way of learning to communicate, to be like, I just need to communicate this.
Thank you. Who else has got a question? Oh, come on. Yeah. Chitika. I just want to talk about you. I think it's all really good.
Say no down to them.
I'll pass it up to you if you want a break. So there was mention earlier, I think it was you, Marlene, that commented on the distinction between feeling uncomfortable and feeling unsafe, or like a situation that's uncomfortable versus a situation that is unsafe. And I think if you've been in the practice of learning that for a while, you can start to distinguish what those are. But if you're early on in that practice, it can be really hard to identify that. and it can feel like every situation is unsafe. So I'm wondering, what are some ways to start to learn how to distinguish that, so that you can know when to step in and be direct versus when to protect yourself?
Yeah, I don't have a short answer for this. Yeah, it's a moment to think
Go
about
for
it.
it. I'm trying to think about it. It's just like, say it.
My first reaction is, I'm a Black woman, there's nowhere outside my house that I feel safe. And this is, it's okay, because this is how I was, I'm prepared for that reality. Because there's no alternate. I'm either prepared, perpetually preparing myself for unsafe spaces. Even in those spaces where I have grown confidence. There's always this, not if, but when factor. I can be in even a room full of Black people and Black women. It's always going to be something. This is not, the goal of this life is not to provide perpetual comfort for me. It is that when I am feeling unsafe, where in my spirit body is protecting me. And I have found so much gratitude in the grace of God. I'm Muslim, I have a lot of faith that my angels be looking out after me. And so in these moments where I am emotionally, physically unsafe, I have nothing else to call upon but my faith. And that's a beautiful thing. I have had the privilege of being challenged every day to give me an opportunity to call upon my higher creator, to prove my worth on the planet. That's a gift. I'm very grateful for walking in this body, on this planet, in the space that I occupy, because it has shown me who I am and how powerful I actually am. So safety and fear, I can be in unsafe spaces and have no fear. There's a difference there. I'm not trying to create comfort. Actually, comfort is something that people fall into and stay there. I like growth. And so there's no hesitation for me. I run straight into, like, honestly, I think if I was like, if I be a boxer or something, like, I like to fight. But like, it doesn't scare me, because I know how powerful I am, and I know that I've got love of God, and my community has got my back. I never walk on this planet alone. Like, I'm just gonna let you know, when you see me, you see thousands of people. And that's how the world should approach me. And so I'm just waiting until they learn.
Thank you for sharing that, Julia.
Yeah.
I wanna, if there's like two more questions and we can make two answers, I'm gonna have to edit that out. And I just want to create space for that for people. Anybody else?
I wanted to ask about regaining trust in the industry that is a little chaotic. So, like, where were moments for yourselves? Sorry, just awesome. What were some moments from yourselves that you were able to say, I trust this industry, I want to get back and do the work that I'm passionate about? Just trying to see some insight on that.
Yeah, I have officially decided, I think, for myself that I don't think I'm ever going to work for an institutional nonprofit. Yeah. I say that with a lot of love. I have so much love for nonprofits. That's why I have so much anger towards them, because I want y'all to do better. It's just kind of like the way that I feel about the healthcare industry, vet care industry. We know that all of these industries at its core are deeply flawed. People are burned out. There's a lot of pain in these, but I do want to have hope and love that we can make a change and that it will get better. For me, the way that I'm dealing with it is that I now, as a consultant, I get to work with nonprofits, but out of arm's length. So I can do all of these things. I am able to jump in and be a capacity add when you need me as your consultant, need the strategic support, need that thought partnership. But I know that it is not my responsibility whether or not this organization is going to keep going. And I felt so much immense pressure from my previous job that it was my responsibility to keep the nonprofit going, that if I had left, it would fall apart. But realistically, that's not gonna happen. And so in a weird way to answer your question, I'm sorry, is that I love the nonprofit industry so much, but I know that I'm never gonna be able to be in it again. I can't do that to myself. And the way I found that works for me is being able to work with nonprofits on specific projects and specific scopes that I know that I'm gonna be able to bring my best self, but know that I won't be burdened with all of the million other hats that everybody wears in every single nonprofit all the time.
Also getting paid a lot of more money. I just wanted to mention, I still work super part-time with the nonprofit because I believe they are doing it right, and they are called Totem Star. They're an amazing organization. Please support them. Youth doing music production. I do vocal mentorship and all that. So that was one of my ways is I have a relationship with the ED there, and I've known him since I was like 16, and he asked me to be a part of it. And I was like, I don't know, I'm coming out of nonprofit. But we had a conversation, and I know for a fact that like they are doing it right. They're letting young people lead, actually lead, not tokenistically lead, as major contributors to everything that happens at the organization and the decision making. And that's what I wanted to see. Of course, there are still flaws because of the bureaucracy, but I'm on that team every day, and I feel listened to when I point out something, and I feel like there's actual action happening. So find a great nonprofit. If you are at one that you don't feel like that is. I feel like it exists and it's emerging is more than most.
Thanks, Amy. One more. You guys can.
First, thank you to all the panelists for offering their wisdom and your specialty and your experience and your vulnerability. I'm curious about, you talked about themes of healing, trusting intuition, trusting the body. What are the things, practices, connections, people, beliefs that have helped you to stay on that healing journey? And I define healing as anything that helps us to remain in healthy connection with ourselves and with those we are in community with. So, with that definition, we'd like to hear your thoughts.
I was waiting for your question. I've given up trying to do anything by myself, and it's fruitless. When I'm talking about healing, too, here's another thing that has really made a distinction for me over the last few years is that I don't go to work to find healing. I go to work with the expectation of not being traumatized. Work is for work. Work is where I go to accomplish the mission I was paid to do. I do not go to work to help other people heal outside of my own humanity. There are moments where we bring our whole selves to work, and we've had conversations about this in that atmosphere lately about how much of ourselves are we really inviting. How much of ourselves is really welcome. And we are in the process as we speak on trying to redefine, because the whole nature of work, by the way, has changed. People are not so down with capitalism as they have been. And we are more independent in our thought. We are more demanding of our humanity. And we just don't care about money as much as they think we did. We really don't. 47% of Americans surveyed would quit their job just for a cultural shift, for less pay. That's almost half of us be willing to leave our job for less pay because we don't like the culture there. So it's not about money for us. They're having to recognize and understand that the new worker of the new age is a whole and full human who's absolutely competent and capable to do the job they came to do, no more, no less. My expectation for us to learn the very basics of 2023, how to live together, it's all on the internet. There are workshops, there are TED Talks, there are YouTube videos, there are books, articles, magazines, newspapers. Figure it the heck out. But when I come to work, that should have already been done. I'm not coming here to explain to you what are microaggressions. And if I have to, I'm gonna give you some grace, but don't make me do it twice. I got stickers.
Yeah, I'll let
No, really quick, I just want to add, I want to say that it's really hard to heal in a space that harmed you. It's probably close to impossible. I really don't see how it's actually lucratively possible to do that. And I've had the extreme privilege of being able to leave that and be able to still find something that sustains me. But it also reminded me that all of that effort, all of me that I had put into my job, that's all of me that I get to spread across every aspect of my life that I love. And it's not fair, really, if you think about the makeup of your, how much of yourself that you give to all of these different departments in your life, like, is work really the one that you are the most proud of, that you are the one that at the end of the day that you're like, yes, this is what I want to have represent me for my life, then I don't know. I feel like that's been a really large part of my healing journey, is that like, no, there's so many other things about me that make me cool. That's not just my job. And inviting people to remember and find that and remember all the things that you love about yourself outside of your job.